I want to start with a simple yes or no question. I don't mean this to be a trick yes or no question. Answer it either yes or no, or yes or no with a brief one-sentence caveat if you need to. I'd like to hear from each of the three of you, from Ms. Bickert, and then Mr. Pickles, then Mr. Slater. Do you provide a platform that you regard and present to the public as neutral in the political sense?
Yes, Senator, our rules are politically neutral, and we apply them neutrally.
And so you aspire to political neutrality as to left versus right?
We want to be a service for political ideas across the spectrum.
Okay. Mr. Pickles?
We enforce our rules impartially, and our rules are crafted without ideology being included.
Mr. Slater?
Similarly, we craft our services without regard to political ideology, though, as we've discussed today, we're not neutral against terrorism or violent extremism or hate speech.
Yeah, and I appreciate you pointing that out. That is, of course, not what I'm talking about. And that leads into the next question I wanted to raise with each of you. I think it's important. The work each of you are doing in this area is important. It's important for anyone occupying this space to be conscious of those things. You do a service to your to those who access your services by removing things like pornography, terrorism advocacy, and things like that. There's a lot of debate that surrounds this issue and surrounds some of the legal framework surrounding it. As you know, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act has received a lot of criticism. It protects a website from being held liable as a publisher of information by another information content provider. And significantly, Section 230's Good Samaritan provision gives you the promise that you won't be held liable for taking down this type of objectionable content that we're talking about, whether it's something that's constitutionally protected or not. And so for each of the same witnesses, again, I'd ask you, each of you represents a private company. And each of you are accountable to your consumers within your company. And this means that, in some sense, you have incentives to provide a safe and enjoyable experience on your respective platform. So I've got a question about Section 230. Does Section 230, particularly the Good Samaritan provisions, help you in your efforts to swiftly take down things like pornography and terrorist content off your platforms? And would it be more difficult without the legal certainty that Section 230 provides?
Absolutely, Senator. Section 230 is critical to our efforts in safety and security.
Mr. Pickles?
Absolutely, and I'd go further and say that Section 230 has been critical to the leadership of American industry in the information technology sector.
Mr. Slater?
Absolutely, yes.
On a related point, imagine a world where this is suddenly taken away, where those provisions no longer exist. Large companies like yours might be able to, in fact, I strongly suspect still would be able to, and still probably would, filter out this content between the artificial intelligence capabilities at your disposal and your the human resources that you have. I suspect you could, and probably would, still do your best to perform the same function. What about a startup? What about a company trying to enter into this space that each of your companies entered into when they were created not very many years ago? What would happen to them? Ms. Bickert?
Senator, thank you for that question. This reminds me of industry conversations involving smaller companies back before we formed the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism in June of 2017. We were having closed-door sessions with companies large and small to talk about the best ways to combat the threat of terrorism online. And the smaller companies were very concerned about liability. Section 230 is very important for them to be able to begin to proactively act and assess content.
I'd say it's a fundamental part of maintaining a competitive online ecosystem, and without it, the ecosystem is less competitive.
Mr. Slater?
Yes, and I'd just add, the U.S. has Section 230, and that's part of the reason why we have been a leader in economic growth and innovation and technological development. other countries that don't have something like it suffer, and study after study has showed that, and we'll be happy to discuss that more.
If it were to be taken away, so all three of your companies, yours in particular, Mr. Slater, not exactly known for being a small business or a business with a modest economic impact. But you can identify, I assume, with this concern I'm expressing. If we were to take that away, Google might be able to keep up with what it needs to do, but wouldn't it be harder for someone to start, say, a new search engine company, a new tech platform of one sort or another, somebody starting out in the same position where your company was a couple of decades ago? Wouldn't that be exponentially more difficult?
I think it would create problems for innovators of all stripes, but certainly small and medium-sized businesses would have a lot of trouble potentially getting their arms around that sort of significant change to the fundamental legal framework of the internet.
Thank you. I see my time's expired. Senator Baldwin.